The sun was beginning to set behind the line of manicured trees that framed the Carter family estate, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and lavender. Judge Naomi Carter eased into the driver's seat of her black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, her briefcase neatly placed on the passenger seat, its leather still smelling of the courthouse halls. The day had been long, a grueling domestic violence case, followed by a tense meeting with city officials over rising concerns of racial bias in policing. The irony wouldn't hit her until later. She turned on the jazz station, her fingers gently tapping the steering wheel as Miles Davis's trumpet floated through the speakers. The neighborhood streets were quiet, well lit by modern street lamps and guarded by rows of security cameras affixed to tall brick walls. This was her sanctuary, the place she worked decades to reach, battling bias, clawing through courtrooms, building a legacy case by case. She was the youngest black woman appointed to the state's superior court bench. Everything about this life was earned, deserved. She took a turn past a small community park, waving at Mrs. Thompson, the retired teacher who walked her poodle every evening. Naomi smiled softly, thinking about dinner. Maybe pasta tonight. She'd promised herself to finally relax. Wine, soft music, maybe finish the Baldwin novel waiting on her nightstand. But then came the lights. Red, blue, flashing like sirens in her rearview mirror, a soundless scream in color. Naomi's smile vanished. Her brow furrowed. She glanced at the speedometer, under the limit. Signal lights used properly, nothing erratic. She pulled over instinctively, turning down the radio, her hands moving with calm precision. Gear to park, window down, dome light on. Her heart didn't race. Not yet. She was used to being in control. In the side mirror, a patrol car idled behind her, and a figure emerged. Tall, white male, mid-40s maybe, stiff posture, hand already resting dangerously close to the holster. Naomi tensed. Not because she was afraid, but because she recognized the pattern, the stance, the swagger, the assumption. He approached. "License and registration," he barked. No greeting, no explanation. Naomi tilted her head, catching his name tag just above the badge. Officer Riggs. His voice was sharp, accusatory, as though every second she delayed was another offense. "Good evening, officer," she said evenly, opening her glove compartment and retrieving the documents. "Is there a reason I've been stopped?" "Just give me your license and registration." She handed them over, her face unreadable. His eyes lingered on the name. "Naomi Carter," he said, raising an eyebrow. "This your car?" She didn't answer that. "Not yet." "It is," she said instead, "registered in my name. Is something wrong?" He didn't respond, just scanned the documents again, then looked at her, clearly searching for something that didn't fit. His eyes darted between her face, the vehicle, the name. He was thinking, judging, deciding. "Step out of the car," he said suddenly. Naomi's body stilled. Her knuckles tightened on the wheel, the air shifted. "Excuse me," she asked, voice calm but laced with quiet authority. "You heard me. Step out." She turned off the engine, gathered herself, and opened the door slowly. Her heels clicked lightly against the pavement as she stood tall beside her vehicle. Riggs began circling her, eyes roaming like a scanner, as if trying to find evidence of wrongdoing in her skin. "What's this about?" she asked. "Just doing my job," he replied, but his hand still hovered near the holster, and his gaze held none of the procedural neutrality she'd taught officers about from the bench. Naomi folded her arms. "I'd like to know the probable cause for this stop, officer." He didn't answer directly. Instead, he moved back toward his cruiser, documents in hand. She could hear him murmuring into the radio. The words were distant, but she picked up key phrases. Suspicious vehicle. Possible match. Black female driver. There it was. That familiar sting, the one she thought she'd left behind after law school, after her clerkship, after every courtroom battle won. But it always found its way back. She was never just a woman, never just a driver. She was always something more, to them. Something threatening. She looked down the street. A group of neighborhood kids on bicycles paused at the corner, watching curiously. One boy whispered something, and a girl giggled nervously. Naomi's heart broke for them. She'd fought to be a role model. Now she stood on the curb like a criminal. Riggs returned, a slight twitch in his jaw. "There's an alert out for a stolen vehicle matching this description. I need you to stay right there." "This car," Naomi said clearly, "is registered to me, Judge Naomi Carter. I have the title in my glove box. You're making a mistake." He tilted his head, unconvinced. "Judge, huh? That's supposed to mean something to me?" "It should," she replied, voice colder now, "and it will." But he wasn't listening. His stance stiffened again. His hand reached behind him. "Turn around, hands behind your back." The world seemed to slow. Naomi didn't move. "You're detaining me. I'm placing you under suspicion." "No, you're profiling me," she snapped, finally letting the heat rise in her voice, "and I will not comply with an unlawful order." Riggs stepped forward closer now. "Ma'am." "Call your supervisor," she commanded, the authority in her voice unmistakable. "Now." For the first time, a flicker of doubt danced in his eyes. It was quick, almost invisible, but it was there. Naomi stood still, her eyes locked on Officer Riggs as he shifted awkwardly on the pavement. The arrival of the captain had created a sudden reversal of authority. Moments ago, Riggs had carried himself with the weight of unquestionable power, assuming dominance with the tone of his voice and the placement of his hand near his weapon. Now, that certainty had crumbled into stammering excuses and sidelong glances. Naomi hadn't moved an inch since demanding his supervisor. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than anything he could say. The police captain, a man in his early 50s with graying hair and tired eyes, approached with quick, careful steps. His voice was low, cautious. "Judge Carter, I sincerely apologize for this situation. Officer Riggs was acting on a report, but clearly there's been a misunderstanding." Naomi's eyes didn't leave Riggs. "A misunderstanding?" she echoed, her tone clipped. "He demanded I step out of my own car. He reached for his cuffs. I want to hear from him." Riggs opened his mouth, hesitated, then forced the words out. I received a bolo. Be on the lookout for a stolen vehicle matching the make and model of yours. The plates looked similar. I thought..." Naomi took a slow step forward, the authority in her body language undeniable. "You thought a black woman driving a luxury car in an affluent neighborhood must have stolen it." "No, that's not what I..." "Don't lie to me, officer." Her voice sliced through his denial. "You didn't check the plates. You saw me and jumped to conclusions. You assumed I didn't belong." The captain interjected quickly, trying to calm the rising heat. "Judge Carter, we'll launch an internal review immediately. I'll personally make sure this is handled. Please let us escort you home." Naomi looked past the captain and saw that a few of her neighbors had come out of their homes, standing at a distance on their manicured lawns, watching the scene unfold with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. She spotted Mr. Langston from 2 doors down, arms folded, eyes narrowed. Next to him, a young couple whispered between themselves, likely debating whether to come closer or stay out of it altogether. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was a reflection of something bigger, something more insidious that had remained dormant in her community's subconscious. "This is my car," she said again, louder this time. "It's registered in my name, paid for in full. No leasing, no co-signing. I bought it after my confirmation to the bench, and yet I was treated like a criminal." Riggs had no answer. He stood there like a child caught with a hand in the cookie jar, except the consequences here went far beyond embarrassment. This was a career-altering moment, and he knew it. Naomi crossed her arms. "You never asked me to verify ownership before escalating. You never calmly approached. You went straight to intimidation. That's not protocol. That's bias." She watched as Riggs opened his mouth to speak again, then closed it. What could he say that wouldn't dig his hole deeper? "You know how many times I've ruled on cases involving excessive force, unlawful stops? I've seen officers lie, twist facts, cover up mistakes. But I never thought I'd be standing on this side of it." The captain gestured discreetly to one of the other officers to take Riggs aside. As Riggs walked a few steps away, Naomi caught the look in his eyes, a mixture of fear, shame, and something else. Not remorse. Not yet. Perhaps disbelief that his assumptions had consequences this time. Naomi opened her car door and pulled a document from her glove box. The original registration papers, embossed with her name, address, and the dealership logo. She handed them to the captain. If anyone else in this neighborhood had been driving this car, anyone white, would they have been treated the same? The captain looked down, lips tight. No, ma'am, probably not. Naomi took a slow breath. Then we don't call it a misunderstanding, we call it what it is, profiling. He nodded slowly, visibly deflated. You're right, and I'll file a report myself. I'll recommend sensitivity retraining, whatever steps are needed. Steps? She asked sharply. This isn't about more training, this is about accountability. The moment hung in the air. A teenage girl from down the street stood at the edge of her driveway, phone in hand, recording everything. Naomi caught her eye and gave her a slight nod. That nod would travel, online, through whispers, through neighborhood gossip, and it would carry with it the weight of truth. No one could spin this. The narrative was clear. Naomi's phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out and saw a message from her daughter, Layla. Mom, everything okay? I heard sirens on the street. Naomi quickly typed back, I'm fine, home soon. We'll talk then. She tucked her phone away and looked up at the captain. I want a full copy of every report written about this incident. I'll be submitting a formal complaint, and you can expect a summons in my courtroom. The captain stiffened. Understood. With that, Naomi walked back to her car and got in. The leather seat was warm beneath her as she started the engine. The jazz station resumed playing, but the music felt like background noise now. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly for a few seconds before she exhaled and pulled out slowly. As she drove through the neighborhood, people continued watching from their porches. Her Mercedes glided past them silently, but the message lingered in her wake. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The courtroom was filled with an uneasy hush as Judge Naomi Carter took her seat behind the elevated mahogany bench, her black robe draped with unmistakable authority. The same robe she wore when deciding the fate of others. Today, it carried even more weight. Today, it was personal. It had been 2 weeks since the traffic stop. The department's internal review had been hastily launched following her formal complaint, but Naomi wasn't naive enough to believe it would produce real change on its own. She had seen how these processes worked. Carefully worded findings, polished press releases, and then a quiet return to business as usual. Not this time. Word had spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately, especially after a neighbor's cell phone video leaked online. It showed a black woman in heels and a tailored blazer being ordered out of her car, then revealing her identity with calm fury. The clip went viral, headlines ranging from "Judge profiled in her own neighborhood" to "Justice confronts injustice." The footage didn't show everything, but it showed enough. Enough to force the department's hand. Enough to make the public pay attention. Naomi had kept silent in interviews. Let the facts speak. She didn't want a spectacle. She wanted something far more elusive, institutional reckoning. And today the hearing would begin. The courtroom wasn't packed with press, not yet, but the seats were full. Community members from her own neighborhood, fellow judges, civil rights attorneys, even a few students from the local law school sat stiffly in their seats. Every face turned to her as she took her place, but she didn't look at them. Her gaze stayed focused on the 2 men seated at the respondents' table. Police Captain Howard Reardon sat straight, his suit pressed, his expression blank with professionalism. Next to him, Officer Brad Riggs shifted uncomfortably in his seat, no longer the cocky enforcer who approached her car with suspicion. Today, he looked smaller somehow. His eyes scanned the room anxiously, his lips tight with something between regret and dread. The counsel representing the police department stood and addressed the court. He attempted to open with a rehearsed apology, a vague recognition of the unfortunate misunderstanding that had taken place. Naomi listened, impassive. letting the words slide past her like water on glass. When he pivoted to highlight Officer Riggs's commendable service history, she raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Finally, it was her turn. She looked out over the room, pausing just long enough to silence even the softest rustling. Then, with steady hands, she removed her robe and set it neatly over the chair's back. Beneath it, she wore a dark blue suit, the kind she wore years ago as a young civil rights attorney before she'd ever worn a gavel. Today, she wasn't just a judge, she was a plaintiff, a citizen, a black woman demanding accountability. "I requested this hearing not out of anger," she began, her voice calm, measured, "but because silence is complicity, and I've spent too many years watching silence choke progress in this very city." She moved slowly to the center of the courtroom, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "What happened to me was not an isolated incident. It wasn't just one officer's lapse in judgment. It was a reflection of a culture that teaches certain officers to see a black face and instinctively tighten their grip on their weapon." She turned toward the bench, addressing the Oversight Committee now. "I have reviewed Officer Riggs' record. He's never been cited for excessive force. No formal complaints have stuck, but that doesn't make him blameless. It just means the system around him has shielded him from accountability." Her words landed heavy. "I asked him to state his reason for the stop. He gave none. I showed him my identification, my registration, and still he moved to arrest me. It was only when I demanded his supervisor and that supervisor recognized my name that I was allowed to leave." She took a step closer to the respondents' table. Riggs looked away. "But what if I hadn't been Judge Carter? What if I'd just been Naomi Carter, public defender, Naomi Carter, social worker, Naomi Carter, nurse on her way home from a night shift? Would I have been cuffed, booked, worse?" No one in the room breathed. Every person in this city deserves to be treated with respect, not just those whose titles scare officers into backing down. I refuse to accept a world where justice depends on name recognition. She returned to the bench, placing her hand on the robe again, but not wearing it. The issue isn't just Officer Riggs. It's the training, the supervision, the embedded fear and prejudice that are rarely addressed until someone bleeds, or, in my case, until someone powerful is humiliated. The committee chair, an older man with graying temples and cautious eyes, leaned into his mic. "Judge Carter, what remedies are you seeking today?" Naomi didn't hesitate. Immediate suspension of Officer Riggs, pending a full disciplinary review. Mandatory racial bias training for every officer in the department, reviewed and revised by independent experts. And quarterly reporting to this court on all traffic stops conducted in the city, broken down by race, gender, and outcome. The defense counsel began to object, citing privacy concerns, data burden, but Naomi silenced him with a raised hand. "I've read every statute. I've ruled on every motion related to departmental oversight. You can't out-lawyer me. What I'm asking for is legal and long overdue." The committee members whispered among themselves. Tensions swelled. Then the chair spoke again. "We'll recess for deliberation." Naomi nodded, stepping away from the bench. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed with quiet applause and murmurs. A young black law student approached her, eyes wide with admiration. "Judge Carter, that was incredible. Thank you." Naomi smiled faintly. "Make sure you speak when it's your turn. That's how this changes." Down the corridor, she saw her daughter, Layla, standing by the vending machine, 16 years old, eyes as fierce as her mother's, phone still in hand. She had been watching through the live stream. "Mom," Layla said as Naomi approached, "they really listened to you." Naomi brushed a strand of hair from Layla's forehead. "They heard me. Let's see if they listen." Layla hesitated. "Do you ever get tired of having to fight for basic respect?" Naomi looked at her daughter for a long moment, then finally said, "Yes, but I'm more tired of the alternative." An hour later, the committee reconvened. The chair called the court to order and cleared his throat. "We've reviewed Judge Carter's petition. We agree that the actions taken by Officer Riggs were inappropriate, lacked probable cause, and suggest a failure of training and discretion. As such, Officer Riggs will be placed on administrative leave pending further review. The department will institute a new set of bias training modules and submit quarterly demographic reports for oversight. These measures take effect immediately. A murmur rippled through the room. Naomi didn't smile. She didn't gloat. Instead, she inclined her head and turned to leave. As she walked past Officer Riggs, he stood. She paused, glancing at him. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came. She didn't wait. Outside, a crowd had gathered, media trucks, curious onlookers, supporters holding signs that read, "Justice means everyone, stop profiling now, black bench, black power." Naomi stepped down the courthouse steps slowly, each movement deliberate. A reporter rushed toward her. "Judge Carter, do you have a comment?" She looked past him toward the horizon where the sun was setting behind the skyline. She spoke without pausing. "This is not the end. This is the beginning of a conversation this city has avoided for too long. It's not about me. It's about what happens next." She walked to her car, the same black Mercedes she had been pulled over in 2 weeks ago. It gleamed under the streetlights, spotless, familiar, hers. She opened the door and sat inside, the engine humming softly beneath her hands. She stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror, strong, centered, unflinching. There would be more hearings, more battles, more days where being who she was meant being questioned, doubted, challenged. But there would also be movement, momentum, the rusted gears of a system beginning finally to grind forward. She exhaled, adjusted her mirror, and drove off into the night. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.